Going in, it was very quiet, and it was like being on it was a big airplane, like elongated DC-9s and stuff. And we left out of Travis Air Force Base, and there were flight attendants, female flight attendants that everybody was gaping at mostly. Uh, took us to Hawaii and then to Clark Field in the Philippines, and then into Saigon.
What was your first impression after landing in Saigon and the doors in the plane open and you get out? What was your first impression?
Well, it was a third world country. I'd been in them in the Navy over in the Western Pacific. You know, it was a lot like going to Olongapo in the Philippines or Manila in the Philippines. I'd been to a lot of these places. And so the city of Saigon was a hustle bustle kind of place.
Through your tour, what was your basic job down in the
I
Mekong?
had two jobs. First of all, I was a patrol officer with River Division 535. And what I did was I was responsible for two boats. We'd go out on patrol, usually at night, and spent all night out there. The Mangtit River was one of the operations we did. I mentioned that. Then we went up to do the Vinte Canal, the border interdiction operation up on the Cambodian border. And I'd been in the River Division probably about 6 months. And a message came in and was posted uh, on the division bulletin board or something that the Navy was looking for people that knew something about agriculture because they're trying to train the Vietnamese. We're leaving this war. We're turning things over to them. A lot of these guys come out of Saigon. They don't know anything about agriculture, and we need people that'll help do this. So I said, well, I don't have a technical background in agriculture, but I grew up on a farm. So I know a little bit about pigs and chickens, but I said I don't, I mainly was dairy cows. I milk cows. But I said, it might be something for me since we're turning these boats over anyways. And it probably, so I sent my name down there. And the next thing I know, Captain Falk wants to see me down in Bintui. So I go down there and I explained to him. I said, well, I think you can do what needs to be done. He says, we're going to start putting actual pigs and chicken farms in these various bases all over the Mekong Delta. And I've been told I got to do this by Zumwalt, and I'm looking for people that'll do it. Mr. Kidder, and I think you may be our guy. I said, well, if you want me to be the guy, I'll come and do it. Probably saved my life. Who knows? I wasn't on the river. I got off the patrol duty. I was down in Bintui. And Bentui never got hit while I was there. And it was in Canto, near Canto, the big city. So I spent the last 5 months, I think, and I would go out to these Mito and to Chowduck and to Longshuin and places where we had bases for the boats, where the Vietnamese crews were going to be living after we left to run these operations. And the base commander would say, "All right, we want to start a pig farm." I had to go to Saigon to get Vietnamese currency. I couldn't buy it on the black market, right? Black market would get more of it. I mean, Americans had the rules though, so I had to go to Saigon and get the currency. Then a Vietnamese, um, actually the secretary, she was a pretty gal too. Hung her name was. Um, she found a Vietnamese Navy guy nearby, and we would go into the marketplace, and he would be my guy to negotiate the purchase of pigs or baby chicks or whatever. And one of the things I did to get started, there was a Catholic orphanage in Canto, and I said to Captain Falk, I said, this might be a good training ground for all of the people around this area to see how this is done. And I knew how to raise baby chicks. I'd done it as a kid. So we got, I don't know, a couple hundred, maybe 100 baby chicks and took them to Sister Anna sent down and she had set up a chicken house and she had the wire here and this and that. And a brooder to keep them warm when they were small. And so we used that sort of as a training area for around Bentui, Cantu area. Then I could fly. Sometimes I'd fly this livestock because the main, you might say, market for all this kind of stuff was in Canton, which was the largest city in the Delta. And they had annual or daily or at least weekly auctions. Where you could go and buy stuff at auction. I'd take the Vietnamese currency and this Vietnamese guy with me, a Navy guy, and we'd go out and buy this stuff. Well, what am I going to do? I got three pigs that are supposed to go up to Chow Duck on the Cambodian border. So that was the kind of stuff I was doing near the end of the war. And did it make any change in what happened? No, probably, but it was an attempt by the Americans to be responsible in the way they were turning over the equipment, to the Vietnamese.
So you're part of that Vietnamization process of handing the Delta over to the Vietnamese with the idea that American forces are going to pull out. After near the end of your tour, at the end of your tour, were you confident that Vietnamization would work, that South Vietnam would be able to stand on its own?
And the quick answer is no. I had read all of Bernard Fall's books before I went to Vietnam, and I found that the Vietnamese were a very cohesive people, very smart, that this was a civil war basically, and that probably the South was on the losing side of this civil war. We couldn't fight it for them, we could help them. Gradually, we just started getting less and less support. And at the end, we didn't hardly have fuel for the boats over there. I mean, Americans walked away from Vietnam. But even had we stayed, I mean, I don't think the outcome, it would have taken longer, I think, for the war to end. I was of the opinion it was probably unwinnable when I went over there, and I guess I was as confirmed in it, maybe more so when I left. Wasn't surprised at all that
Yeah.
it ended the way it did.
Now, so let's talk about the earlier part of your tour when you're out on the patrol boats. Um, what was the general nature of combat down there in the Mekong? Was it just quick firefights primarily?
Pretty much, days of boredom, moments of terror. I mean, um, and we had, when we were on the Mangtit River, we had, we're told to, and we went out at night enticing combat because we knew we had the firepower to nail them if they shot at us. We had helos right over the uh, next door, you know what I mean, ready to come in. So
Mm.
we would drift down the river with these were tidal rivers, and the tide would change, the current in the river would change, and we would turn the motors off and drift. Sometimes we'd drift right into shore and just stick in the jungle or the weeds or whatever was there, waiting for something to happen. And we had our radars on then, and we could see maybe a couple miles either way down the river if anybody was trying to cross. And then we get a loudspeaker system on a boat, and we put a tape on it, and we called it the spook tape or the ghost tape. And it was about a Vietnamese who had fought against the South and had gone to hell instead of heaven. And woo, 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 how, how, how. That was kind of would go out. It scared the shit out of the Vietnamese guys we had on the boats we were training. They didn't like it at all. But the idea of it was is to get the Viet Cong pissed off so they'd open up. And then if they did open up, we'd have a firefight, right? Because we knew we could win the firefight. But like I say, one guy got killed on the Mang Thip Canal by a B-40 rocket. Uh, Captain Olson died in a boating accident, and really that's the only fatalities that I saw on the Mang Thip River. We had a shot at once. We shot at somebody, but mostly it was a policing operation where we were keeping things down so that this commercial boat traffic could move in the daytime. In the morning, if we come off these ambush positions up on the Cambodian border and there had been nobody had been killed, and everybody was in good shape, uh, there was Armed Forces radio, and you weren't supposed to. Guys had it down there, but you didn't want to play it at night because You don't want the enemy to know where you were, of course. Uh, but then in the daytime, guys played Armed Forces radio a lot. Anyways, this guy would come on in the morning. It was a spoof on a detective, and it'd say, Chicken Man, he's everywhere, he's everywhere." That would end with that. That way. I remember exactly the way the thing would end, a spoof on detectives. And the guys loved it because they thought that the Navy was Chicken Man, chicken shit, basically, right? For sending them out on these boats. So, anyways, invariably in the morning when that program would come on, let's say it was at 7:35 a.m. and we were pulling out of these sites and heading back to base camp, somebody would take a microphone, and these were encrypted microphones. I mean, there was encryption in them. So they were covered circuits. They didn't care about that. These guys would be on the boat somewhere. They'd put the regular mic out there that was open mic, go all over the Mekong Delta. Chicken man, it'd come up on the Navy radio, not the Armed Forces radio. Oh, now, of course, the guys in Saigon will go out, security on the net, security on the net. Who's doing that? Report immediately, blah, blah, blah. And then it would stop and we'd go on back to the base. And nobody'd ever confess they did it, but it would happen quite often, as I remember it.
What was the interdiction about?
Well, there was the North Vietnamese, had gotten as far down as southern Cambodia. And Cambodia was a free sanctuary for them. And there was an area called the Seven Mountains, which was a series of mountains that just sort of sprouted up in the middle of the Mekong Delta. And it was owned by Charlie, as we would say. The Viet Cong owned the Seven Mountains, and the North Vietnamese guys who were coming in bringing arms and ammunition and other goods of war, they would cross the canal we were on. They had to cross it to get to the Seven Mountains. So half the time we'd see them first, half the time they'd get us first.
So basically, the point of the interdiction then was to stop material coming from North Vietnam through Cambodia into the Delta.
Yeah, yeah, that was our mission. The PBR was never built for that mission. Our defense was to hit and run because of the speed we had. We weren't made to sit and slug it out. But on the Vinh Canal, especially as the water went down, we had to take the 30 caliber machine gun or an M60, not a 30 caliber, M60 off the top of the boat and put it up on the bank. And so a couple of guys had to stay up on the bank to get a view of
Wow.
what was coming. So we'd have two guys or three guys in the boat, one guy with a radio, usually me, two guys with a walkie-talkie up on this, and then we'd, halfway through the night, and the other two guys would go out to take the position. I mean, that's not what we were trained and built to do, but
Well,
that's
and
what we were doing.
so then, if you saw stuff coming in, then would you call then helicopters in to come
Well,
get those guys?
you let them get closer, and yeah, I would advise them on the radio. We think we have a contact out here, and they would get the helicopters ready to go wherever they were. And then if our guys were confident they had something, then I had to authorize open fire. I mean, that was one of the officers' jobs, was to authorize the start of a gunfire. One night I remember we had sensors that we put out along a trail. It was like a little peg, you'd put it in the ground. It had a little transmitter on it, and then you'd come back 50 yards, you put another one in, and there were like five of them. And so the first one would go off, beep, 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 and it would be maybe out in the rice paddy where you couldn't see it. And everybody would get ready because with something's happening, something's coming at us. And one night, beep, two beeps went off, beep, beep, beep. And then the third beep went off, beep, 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 beep. And we couldn't see anything, but I said open fire. We laid out about 3,000 rounds, no response, no fire back. So we stopped. So the next day we go out and do a sweep, and we killed a water buffalo.
In what you write, you kind of point a couple times to a chasm between the guys you're with in the rivers and the folks you refer to as the deep thinkers in Saigon. So you've got the deep thinkers in Saigon, and then you have the sailors who are actually at the tip of the spear.
I'll give you one example. I was down on the Vinte Canal, and I got back to the YRBM, and the captain called me and he said, "There's been a complaint from Saigon that you guys missed a crossing on the river last night when you were down there. It was at such and such a grid line." And I got the map out and I looked at that grid line and I said, "That's where we were last night. Nobody crossed that grid line. I don't know who these informers are up in Saigon. Probably people giving feeding something to a guy at dinner time so they get paid. You know what I mean?" I mean, who knows? But the intelligence from Saigon had no relation to what was happening on that river, at least on that particular night, you know?
Yeah,
And that's the kind of thing guys would complain about. And why doesn't Zumwalt come down here at, at midnight instead of noon? We'll show them what this river is all about, right? Well, we're not going to send the chief naval officer in Vietnam down there at midnight. Guess what? It's not going to happen.